When I chose to change my perspective and focus on the things that were positive in my life, I realized that my tiny little brain in this human condition, that this body that God gave us, like I only have so much bandwidth, and I can only focus on so much at one time. And if I choose to focus on gratitude, then the world becomes a place of abundance.
Someone cares about you.
There's a reason why your heart is beating.
You still have a purpose.
Don't give up.
It's important to know that you're not alone.
You're not alone.
You're not alone.
You are not alone.
Thank you for joining us today on the 1 Mile, 1 Veteran podcast, where we learn to focus on the fundamentals to improve our mind and body. And one of the most fundamental things we can do for our health is sleep, which is why I'm excited to talk to Navy SEAL veteran and sleep genius, Rob Sweetman, who after 8 years of military service on one of the most elite special operating forces in the world and experiencing the devastating loss of fellow service members to mental illness, has devoted his life to understanding sleep's impact on mental health and passing that knowledge along. Rob, welcome to the 1 Mile, 1 Veteran podcast.
Thank you for having me, Danny. I'm so excited.
Absolutely. Well, as our listeners begin tracking their walk through the Strava app, would you please share with us what inspired you to join the Navy and become a SEAL at the ripe old age of 28?
Yeah, what the heck was I thinking? You know, I guess I didn't realize that buds would be so hard. I guess I thought it would be pretty easy. The only thing I had to go on was that video on YouTube, Class 224. Anybody can Google it. And I looked at the video and I'm thinking, that doesn't look so hard. I mean, sure, he's yelling at him, but my folks yelled at me louder than that. Like, sure, he's out there working out. I was a wrestler. I've worked out a lot harder than that. What I didn't realize, and this is how stupid I am, I did not realize that we were going to have to stay awake the whole time. It didn't really hit me until I just finished playing poker with my brother the night before at his house in Pacific Beach, and I'm in Buds, and Hell Week is starting the next night. And I show up and they're like, yeah, we're going to lock you down and you're going to get no sleep this whole week. I mean, you would think that I would talk to somebody about this along the way and figure it out. But that's how much of a knuckle dragger I am. And you have to be a little bit dense, I think, to go through this training. Maybe dense isn't the right word, but extremely resilient, right? You can't worry about things too much. I say that because dense probably isn't the right word. We have 75% college graduate rate for SEALs coming through, both officers and enlisted, and really, really intelligent, talented people. But you got to have some grit. So I gritted it out. I made it through Hell Week, 5.5 days straight of no sleep. You start on Sunday, and the Secretary of the Navy, Ray Mabus at the time, secured us on Friday. And he was late, and we were pissed off. We were like, why is he late? But, you know, he has more important things to do. So why did I join the SEAL teams at 28? Well, I guess you can say because that was the cutoff, right? They don't allow you to have a SEAL contract after 28, not without a waiver. And I had considered joining the military. My brother was a Marine, and I guess I just was more focused on myself at the time. I wanted to make money. I had a successful insurance brokerage, but all that started to fall apart when my business partner, my cousin, was killed viciously in this car accident. And so I quit that, and I kind of wandered around. I did a couple other things, but I needed to find some real meaning and purpose in my life. And I guess I started thinking about it and eventually found my way into the Navy recruiting office and said, you know what? I'm going to do it. And you know as well as I do, signing that dotted line, man, you're freaking out. You're like, what am I doing? But you got to, you know, it is so silly. You're just signing, but it's such an emotional roller coaster. I signed my name on the dotted line. I had done the PST. I qualified, and I just pulled the trigger because I wanted to serve my country, because I wanted to be, like, earn my right to be an American here in the United States.
You know, that's really funny. You talk about that excitement and anxiety of signing that contract when you walk into the recruitment. I remember signing that when I was 17 years old. I hadn't even entered the senior year of high school. I just finished my junior year. I knew that this was what I was doing for 4 years, and I was confident that everything was going to be fine. And like, talk about not you said maybe denseness isn't the right word. I think it's the arrogance of ignorance. When we don't know what to expect, we're certain we can accomplish anything. And, it's in those moments when I look at guys like yourself, the special operators that have put yourselves through such rigorous training and pushed beyond limits that people perceive are impossible. That's when it's not that you've developed the resilience, that's when you've proved your resilience. And so thank you for committing to doing that at an age when a lot of people are halfway through their military career, or even looking to get out, and you come in as one of these junior guys taking orders from somebody 6 years your junior. How was your time in service? Do you feel like you earned your stripes and that coveted title that you were looking for as citizen?
I did. I did. But as you pointed out, having 18-year-olds bark down commands at you is a little frustrating. My mom told me I'd never make it because I don't like listening to authority. And I guess she was right. I did end up butting heads with authority my entire time in the military. But yeah, so a couple of things there. One, heck yeah. Heck yeah, I earned my right to be a citizen in this country. And not that you have to do that to be a citizen here. I think that all of us can serve in different ways. But my way as a warrior class individual was to do this. And so I went through buds. That was a crucible. And I really felt like I proved myself as a man. Not that you need to do that, and not that the folks that washed out are any less. But for me, that was such a pivotal moment because I proved myself that I could do this thing, right? And then I went into the SEAL teams, experienced a lot of trauma. It was a tough pill to swallow. The reality is very different than the illusion that you cast in front of yourself before you take on and embark on something like this. So I just dealt with it. Like I said, I butted heads with leadership. I had kind of a bumpy road. The personality and the culture of the SEAL teams was not exactly what I was expecting. And as I left, I was medically retired. I hurt my back, which I'd love to talk about. As I left, I kind of had a bad taste in my mouth. Since then, that brotherhood and that positive light has been restored because I think probably most of it was just within myself, right? My own challenges that I was, putting on the Navy and the SEAL teams. So I take full ownership of that. But yes, I checked all the boxes in the SEAL teams.
That's awesome. Now you talked about your back injury. I had heard or read somewhere that it was, when I tell people I have back pain, chronic back pain since the time I was 23 years old. Everybody wants to be like, oh yeah, me too, and start giving tips. But what I heard and read about yours was that you had a quadruple herniation. What happened?
Correct. So there's two injuries. One, the quadruple hernia, is not the disc in the back that was from my guts ripping out when I was carrying logs and buds. And then after that, they sewed me up and put a mesh in to keep my guts from coming back out. That was somewhat painful, but then a little bit later on, I did an endo on a mountain and smashed my face. And endo is like when your feet come over your back. And I took the skin off my forehead, I cracked my neck and my lower back. And from that point on, I couldn't stand up straight and I had tremendous back pain. It was difficult to get out of bed. I had a whole warm-up process to do anything in life. And I was vigilant about, trying to continue. Ate a lot of painkillers, mostly like Motrin and stuff like that. I didn't want to get hooked on the Loratab and Oxycontin, the stuff they give out. But it was a tough road because I was in a tremendous amount of pain trying to operate and I just couldn't continue. So I told my master chief that I needed to take a knee and I did. I went to a training command and for the next 2 years I tried to rehab, but it just turned into more depression, more drinking. The back never got better. The surgeon said he wanted to come in through my stomach and do a 3-level scaffolding. where you put in the screws and the metal and kind of freeze it in place. And the question that I had from him, coming from sort of a chiropractic background, we always went to chiropractors, is that okay? So when I look at the skeleton, when I look at L5S1, it should be, there's a little bit of a curvature, but it should be like on top of it. So you're saying that I have a 50% spondylolisthesis. This vertebrae is 50% over the other one, and it's going to continue to degenerate and sever my spinal cord. I won't be able to walk eventually. So what you're wanting to do is freeze this in place. It's like, yes, that's correct. And I did not want the surgery, so I'm asking him questions, and I'm thinking like, okay, so I'm talking to the surgeon, you're going to sort of put that in the correct place, and then you're going to freeze it, right? And he says, no, we're not going to do that. We're just going to freeze it in place. So you're going to freeze it in the exact way it is now, all jacked up. He said, yep. I said, no thanks. So that was against medical advice. They med boarded me because I refused the surgery. I was processed out. But the good news is I did get benefits. And then really that is where the really third chapter of my life began. This journey to recovery, this journey to helping others. That story just started to get written when I made that decision to say no to the surgery.
Rob, I want to go back just a little bit because to the consultation with the surgeon and this whole medical separation aspect, because for our civilian listeners, they may not understand exactly what a medical separation is. They hear about medical retirements. They hear about, you get these amazing benefits when you get medically separated or whatnot, whether it comes in the form of disability or a permanent check, final healthcare, XYZ, yada, yada, yada. One of the things that isn't fully explained is the toll that it takes on the service member, because like yourself, I was kind of advised that I would have to be medically separated um, for my injuries that I sought help for. I could have gritted through, and who knows what would have happened to my life. It probably would have ended up worse in the long run if I would have taken the advice of some of the leadership. But instead, I kind of took your route and said, no, I'm not just gonna suck it up. I'm not just gonna go through the surgery and see what happens. I am going to take a more holistic approach, which led to me losing a career that I loved, a mission that I loved, a purpose that I loved, and also a community, because our fellow warfighters, they have an idea of somebody that's being medically discharged as potentially a malingerer. So how was that toll for you as you were going through this medical process?
Well, there was a lot of shame, right? There's a lot of exclusion, meaning guys that I used to run with, they wouldn't answer my text or my calls. I was no longer a pipe hitting frogman SEAL running with the platoon. And once you're out, you're a burden, right? And so I'm not included on any of the text messages anymore. I'm depressed. I don't know that if I have any value as a man anymore. I can't operate in the SEAL teams, and I may not even be able to lift my children as I grow older. And the surgeon said, "You're never going to run again. Definitely not jujitsu, which is one of my passions." And so I was faced with some really, really tough decisions. And amidst, feeling exiled, feeling like my career and potentially my life are just over. Like I didn't know how to value myself when everything that is important to this job was taken away. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of mental battles there, and that's not even getting into the VA and the DoD process. It is such a nightmare. When I say 2 years, it literally took 2 years. I'm in the doctor every week. I got multiple doctors. They're not talking to each other. I'm managing paperwork. I'm trying to manage, like, how do I process this stuff correctly so I don't get screwed? And the truth is, most people do, right? But some people are vigilant enough to get the paperwork right, and everything turns out okay. And my situation did turn out okay. It was a battle. It was a battle to get my disabling condition rated at a point where I could, and there's lawyers involved, right? To a point where
Mhm.
I can break the threshold of a medical separation, which means like you're no good, see you later, versus you're no good, we're going to give you some benefits. I think that threshold was like 30% disability, 30 or 40. So I was able to break that threshold. I was able to secure medical care for my situation, and that was just a blessing.
So how'd you go about navigating the transition back into civilian life? You said you brought in some lawyers to help with like the VA medical side, but how'd you start also navigating the mental side to move forward in life after your time as a frogman?
Yeah, through alcohol. Um,
Mm.
Alcohol was my go-to, and when you and your wife are drinking a bottle of wine watching Netflix, it seems like it's okay to just justify that and rationalize it, but any level of alcohol is really poison. And when you drink it consistently and in larger volumes, it is a real problem, and there is no positive outcome to this. If you watch Andrew Huberman, he talks about alcohol being a poison. It truly, truly is. So I did not transition the way that my future self now would recommend. But I did transition, and I did have a plan, and I did try to hit some of my wickets, right? Like, so I went to the Honor Foundation, which is a transition program. I was accepted into the MBA program at University of California. I finished my master's. I did all the stuff that I thought I was supposed to be doing, and I'm paying the mortgage. But deep down inside, I was dying. And I really had to do some shadow work because I'd come to hate the person that I was, truly. And I know that impacted my family, but I had good intentions. But when you don't love yourself, and it's hard to admit that, you probably don't even realize it, right? But when you're doing things like drinking alcohol and eating junk food and stuff like that, you are not treating your body like you love it. You're not treating it like it is your child that you're trying to raise, right? You're treating it like crap, and you're trying to fill these instant gratification moments because the painful state that you're in is too much. You want to change state, whether that's through alcohol or pot gummies or whatever the heck you're doing, eating for comfort. And so it took a lot of shadow work. It took a lot of self development. It took a lot of mentorship to really turn my perspective around and figure out what the heck I should be doing with this life that God gave me, right? I didn't want it to be a waste. And I wanted my children to be proud of me. But first I had to face the demons and face the dark thoughts that I was dealing with transitioning out.
Yeah, so how did you start to recognize that this is how you were feeling? Because as you mentioned, like we can justify a lot of stuff to ourselves. You know, our friends may not recognize that we're packing on a few pounds because we're eating foods that are breaking down our body. Especially when we get older, our bodies are way less forgiving of the poisons that we put in them, and react way differently. I ended up with a pretty bad medical condition myself because of the way that I was treating my body just a few years ago, that hospitalized me for a week. Um, and nobody really caught on that I was doing anything bad, even though I had stopped drinking for 12 years at the time, and I was reasonably healthy in other areas. So, how did you come about recognizing this, and how did you start making that shift?
It was a slow grind. A slow grind of realization of a reality check, and there are a number of different things that came along that kind of pushed me in the right direction. And sometimes adversity is painful, and sometimes the lesson that we have to learn is through adversity, and that's really tough when you're face to face with yourself. When you have to take a hard look at yourself in the mirror. And so I went through a series of reality checks with both my personality, with my lifestyle choices. And all of this was at the same time while trying to figure out a way to heal myself and to make myself whole emotionally and physically from the Navy. So this was a 5 year process in terms of my back. I did stem cells in Mexico. I did acupuncture. I did acupressure. I tried yoga. I did, stretching and calisthenics. I did chiropractic. I did everything that you can imagine, meditation, all things, transcranial, direct current stimulation, anything that you can imagine. And it kind of went in phases. I was able to restore a lot of the mobility and core functionality within my body, then healing the phantom pain that remained after I should have been sort of healed. That was another journey. And then understanding my ego's control, this negative narrative that it had cast on my life that was totally wrong. I understand how I got there, but it was a really negative place to be. And then finally learning how to love myself and put God first in my life. And that's kind of the journey as it rolled out.
And I love that in the beginning you talked about the start of this journey before you even went into what the journey was. You said this was a 5-year process. And, when we're thinking about the goals that we shoot for, often our goals are very short. We hope to achieve them very quickly and then hope that they have lasting effects in our lives. And that's rarely ever the case. Like a fire that starts quick usually goes out pretty quick. But if you sit there and you nurture it over time, even with small bits of kindling, it'll get better. And I know like one of the things that I had first struggled with when I came back from Iraq in 2006 was my sleeping. I was thrashing about in my sleep. My wife at the time would told me that I was speaking Arabic. I never woke up feeling rested, and so I did what a lot of people do: is I had some glasses of wine at dinner, maybe a couple of beers, and then I became addicted to caffeine. Um, and the quick fix from the doctors was to prescribe me medications like trazodone or give me a sleep apnea machine to hopefully keep me from waking up at night. And that was kind of the start of my first journey. As I saw a symptom, and the quick fix from the military and medical doctors was give me medication and machines to hopefully solve the issue. So how how did you kind of start really loving yourself? Like, what was that first step, and how did it get you to where you're at now as a sleep expert teaching others?
Yeah, I was in the middle of deep depression and I considered taking my own life. And in those moments when you're thinking about how to do it and you're thinking about starting to make plans like and starting to play out like what your kids are going to do, how this is going to mess up their life. Thank goodness I did not go down that path. But I understand how you get there real easy, and you forget about all the beautiful things that you've done in your life and the person that you are in this perfect creation, despite all the mistakes that you've made. And I had what's called a white light experience. I had a transcendental moment when I basically took the blue pill, if people are old enough to remember the Matrix, right? So I chose to transcend this reality, which means that the reality that my ego or my ego's ego, the survival mechanism that keeps us safe, that keeps us on our toes, but ends up being a hypervigilant enemy in our life. I figured out that it was all just an illusion. I figured out that, in fact, the feelings that I thought nobody else cared about. In fact, they didn't even know they existed. And when I realized that they only existed in my mind, I realized that they were not real, that I only chose to let them live, and they're getting free rent in my head. And when I chose to change my perspective and focus on the things that were positive in my life, I realized that my tiny little brain in this human condition, that this body that God gave us, like I only have so much bandwidth, and I can only focus on so much at one time. And if I choose to focus on gratitude, then the world becomes a place of abundance. And that is the key, is that once you have that shift and you realize that both the ego's narrative that we think we live by, all these identities and these cultural biases, and then society's dream that cast upon us, once we realize that those two things are a little bit of an illusion in a game, then we can kind of rise above that. And once we do that, then we realize that we're actually not in control of anything except for our own thoughts and our own actions. And once we see that, right? Then there's nothing but happiness and joy. And that's what we want. We want to be able to live our life for however much time it is, for the rest of it in joy. And that joy does not come from alcohol and drugs. That short term, like trying to get a quick fix, change state. The thought of changing state is correct, because if we're in a negative, low vibration, like, the thinking is correct, right? We want to change state. And the only tools that people know how to do that is drugs and alcohol and stuff like that. The thinking is correct. They need to uplift themselves, but the methodology is wrong. So if we can teach people how to uplift themselves with the own powers within themselves, that's a superpower, right? Then they have the power to change state, and they can take control over their own life and have ultimate joy for the remainder of the life they have on earth, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I know how I do that for myself, and it's not just through self talk and positive affirmations and visualizations and stuff like that. It's through recognizing what is artificial in my life and what is real in my life. And a lot of the artificial stuff was introduced at a very young age: alcohol, caffeine, um, things that come from without the body, that increase my dopamine, increase my adrenaline, increase these chemicals within my body, the external stimulation through introducing outside forces. And so what I try to do, even when it comes to mental health medications, which thank God I haven't been on now for over 2 years. I went from 18 pills to an occasional antihistamine because my body has an inflammation reaction. Um, because I refused to accept just quick fixes. I took the holistic approach to say my body was created perfectly, designed perfectly, and while it's been damaged through this life, it's also designed to heal. And so I make sure that I do very healing things. What is it that you do to get yourself to that higher plane of existence without the constant influence of external stimuli and drugs?
That is a great question. And that is something that I really want to break open specifically for you right now, in a way that I've never done before. So, when I transitioned out of the Navy, I had been tortured, I had been locked in a box underground, I'd been to combat in combat zones. And as I transitioned out, one of my platoon mates, Ryan Larkin, I wear this bracelet, and a lot of people will not wear this bracelet because he committed suicide. It wasn't some brave, in combat death. He committed suicide, but I still wear it because I want to talk about it and it's important. I had 7 friends commit suicide in 2017, right? So I'm transitioning out and I'm lost. I'm completely lost. And when you contemplate suicide, you're not thinking about God. You're not thinking about love. What you're thinking about is ending your life. How do you get to a point like that? Why would you ever feel like that? Especially like somebody who was in the SEAL teams and has no reason, right? You should be proud of yourself, right? As a corpsman, you should be proud of yourself. We're among the top 1% of humans, right? But that's not how it feels. So I went on a journey, and I talked to you a little bit about the healing modalities, but I also went on a geographic journey. I did spend some time in the Himalayas, in the mountains with monks. I learned techniques just like Wim Hof on breathing, on relaxation, on connectedness with the body. I traveled into the Amazon. I met with shamans, and I learned their traditional techniques that have been around for thousands of years, not the new modern stuff that the FDA and the ADA want us to participate in, right? So with this knowledge, I came back to my very Christian community and took a lens of like, okay, I'm going to take what's useful and discard what's not. I'm going to follow the path that God has outlined for me with an understanding of my relationship with God, not my church's relationship, not what they tell me to believe, but what I believe. And that solidified a connectedness with this ultimate divine power, right? So some of the techniques that I use, prayer is very helpful, but some of the more physical techniques that I use, I actually have transferred that into the 62 Romeo program that I teach. and the Sleep Genius program that I teach. But I do this stuff every single day. I'm not somebody that talks about it, right? I actually do it. And that's what makes me different than a lot of people. So each morning when I wake up, generally I'll make some matcha or some type of a tea, and I'll sit in silence, right? It's very important that we're able to spend a few minutes with ourself. So what does that mean? That means we are not letting our mind wander into the future. They call the future anxiety, right? Worried about what I have to do today. What's my list of stuff? I'm also not worried about the past, right? The past can be trauma, right? The past can be happy, it can be sad, there can be a lot of things, but these memories are things. These memories create the construct of how we think that we're going to predict the future. Without those memories, we don't have anything to forecast the future, right? But those memories can be our worst enemy, especially when they're traumas that become recurring. That's PTSD. So we have to let go of the past because it does not exist. It only exists in our mind. We have to let go of the future because it has not occurred. The only thing that we have is right now in the present. So I sit with myself for a minimum of 2 minutes. Truthfully, it's normally more than 20 minutes, but sometimes more than an hour. But for the person that's listening that wants to get started, 2 minutes is fine. I will typically try to let go of those thoughts. It's very difficult, right? Because our thoughts take hold of everything. And I try to be present. So how are we present? Well, we start with thoughts of gratitude and then we just let go. And when we think of the present, there are only a few things, right? We have our five senses and our brain, and like we're sensing the temperature, we're sensing the sounds in our environment, we're sensing our body. As the famous Bill Filter would say, we do an internal selfie, right? So how does our body feel? Do we have pain? Do we have discomfort? I like to sit cross-legged style on the floor, and then I start breathing. And I have a lot of breathing techniques. A lot of people follow me on Insight Timer. I like to do the Navy SEAL box breathing technique, but I have spun the box breathing 100 ways till Sunday, so you can go on there and find me and try them. They're all free. So I tend to do some box breathing. Sometimes I'll do some Wim Hof Tumo breathing. These things are all derived from the mountains in the Himalayas in India, Tibet, and that whole region. These are ancient techniques, and you'd be surprised because you can have a physiological response, including like an increased, blood flow to the brain, increased cognition, but also a relaxing effect, right? We can go up and down in oscillations through the box breathing, and we can really set ourselves on the right foot. And then after that, I think it's okay to go into meditation. I believe Jesus meditated. I think that meditation is okay. A lot of people, in the church are going to be like, meditation, that's paganism or whatever. That's not true. Okay? Meditation is all about connecting with yourself. There's nothing wrong with it. And when you can do this, you can reach heightened states. Well, isn't that what we were just talking about? We want the ability to change state. Now, a scientist might, describe that as your autonomic nervous system and changing your neurological state, right? You can absolutely do that, right? But pragmatically, right, we want to feel good. And when we feel good, we have escaped the state and we want to change state. We want to feel better. We want to be uplifted. Well, you can do that. You can do that, like the endorphins that you talked about through exercise. So after that, I tend to go on a short run. I don't bring any headphones. I just remain present, right? Sometimes they talk about walking meditation. I guess you could call my running meditation, right? I try to stay alert, and I try to, look around and really take in everything. I don't push myself too hard. I only do nasal breathing while I run. I'm a little stuffy today, but normally I only do nasal breathing, just like James Nestor taught us in the book Breathe. It has a profound effect on the relaxation of the heart during extreme exercise. Then I will take Gus, who's laying right here next to me, my golden retriever. I'll ride my skateboard and let him cut loose like a sled dog. He runs me around. And then I go about my day. And when I approach the day that way, I really am firing on all 8 cylinders. I feel like 100%. And, every day is a challenge, right? But when we approach the day with a little bit of self-care to start with, everything turns out the way that it should be.
You touched on so much there, Rob, from from your travels, where you learned, the masters that you studied on. One of the things that I absolutely love, and we kind of talked about it pre-show, is ancient knowledge. Uh, the people that lived back there, they're not primitive people. They're people that had time to sit there and think about these things and really discover the connections between our body and our environment and our mind, and how to survive in such hostile terrains and still have the drive to go forward. Now, I myself, you know, I have a brain that's slightly broken because it drives me towards depression and suicidal ideations. It's nearly taken my life 3 different times along the way. The first time was because I was severely sleep deprived, new in the Navy, and I suffered the loss of a girlfriend. Didn't know how to cope other than party with my friends, stay up on caffeine, and then go to work, and try to stay awake on an 8-hour watch from midnight to 8 a.m., right? And that just was not good, and in a moment, I was saved, and then the next time was I found identity in the Navy. My identity was I am HM1. I'm preparing younger guys to fill the shoes that I had to fill, in the battlefields of Iraq and Afghanistan, and hopefully they'll come home alive. And when that was taken away from me, my mind again broke. And then the third time was because I was doing things that I deemed really, really good, getting my master's, working, supporting my family, but my mind again was broken. And so I had to really turn to very fundamental things in my life to, one, start to acknowledge that it's okay to have a broken mind, because when we can acknowledge our powerlessness, we can acknowledge that there's tools available. And one of those things that I absolutely loved, one of the simplest ones, and I really want to dive into this because I think it's something that people can start with. Because, when you talk about all that you do, it can be overwhelming, especially for our listeners. Um, we just want to start with very basic things. It's why I ask people, go walk a mile, take 20 minutes for yourself, see what 20 minutes of sunlight and light activity does, and stop listening to the bad noise. Start spending a moment with yourself. And for you, I know one of the things that you teach as part of your 62 Romeo is how to prepare and stay asleep, because that right there primes our day so that you can wake up in the morning and have the willingness to then sit in silence without falling back asleep because you're freaking too exhausted. Um, and so, would you mind discussing kind of what the link between sleep and mental health is, and then how people can start priming themselves for a healthy sleep habit?
That is a very big question. So I'll try to break it down. So the link
All right.
between, yeah, the link between sleep and mental health. I didn't know if there was a link between sleep and mental health. What I did know was that I thought there was a link because Ryan Larkin committed suicide after having terrible sleep habits, getting addicted to the Ambien and alcohol that the Navy was giving out Ambien, and then using stimulants to wake up, and then he stayed awake for 5 days. So never even saw 30 years old. And I thought it had everything to do with sleep. Sure, there was comorbid PTSD and TBI, and that is common in the SEAL teams. In fact, I wanted to give a shout out to Chris Free, who wrote the Operator Syndrome. Now, this is relevant to you too. I think if you read this, you're going to see the same things, but specifically Chris, who's a professor over at University of Hawaii, Hilo, he is analyzed special forces operators and identified all of the different physical and mental ailments that are consistent, this constellation of symptoms that the VA is completely absent knowledge of, right? Like they're like treating everything in an isolated silo and giving a drug for every single thing, but they're not looking at how they affect each other. The doctors aren't talking, and they're not looking at the whole man. They're not looking at a complete picture. Well, Chris wrote this famous article, and he turned it into a book. This is the first edition. It just came out. I'm not sure how much it costs, but it is definitely worth your read. The article itself is free. You can look at it. It's on PubMed, I think. You can Google it. So the operator syndrome really described this relationship a lot of different things to describe, but definitely between sleep health and mental health. But at the time, I didn't know anything, and so I started going to Navy Medical Center Balboa. I started talking to doctors, and it turned out that almost none of the medical doctors had any idea what the heck was going on with sleep. You know what they had? They had their tool set, which is drugs, devices, and surgery. So when I talk to, when you ask the barber for a haircut, you should expect that he's going to recommend a haircut, right? When we look at tool sets, like I remember when I was in the teams, I had a Mark 48 belt-fed machine gun. That was my primary weapon. I had a SIG 226 on my side. That was my secondary. My tertiary was my bench-made blade behind my neck, behind my back. I had actually, I transitioned that to a Winkler eventually. It's a much better knife, but these are my tools. And as a Navy SEAL, what do you think happens if you're on the other end of that tool set, right? That's what I like in the medical community too. It's not that there's anything wrong with what they're doing. Their tool set is geared towards drugs, devices, and surgery. If that's what you want, well, then go to the medical community, right? If you want a holistic approach, then you have to look elsewhere, right? So I found out through talking to these doctors and scientists that there's absolutely a relationship between sleep health and mental health. It's bidirectional. One can cause the other, right? But one of my best friends, Dr. Gaurav Mishra, he is an MD psychiatrist. I went through graduate school with him. The way that he would describe it is like, look, doesn't matter what pill he gives his patient. If the sleep doesn't get better, the symptoms won't get better. However, regardless of whether he gives them a placebo or not, if the sleep gets better, so do the symptoms. And so after 7 years in sleep, I can say that if we sleep deprive somebody, you will see one flavor of medical condition, the DSM-5, or they may be on the 6 now, diagnosable. So the solution to most mental health is actually getting better sleep, is allowing dream sleep to resolve traumas within the dream space. I get into lucid dreaming too. That's a whole nother podcast we need to do. Now, do drugs help get us over the hump? Yes. Do physical practices while we're awake help us? Yes, absolutely. And so the mental health, sleep health relationship is so strong that it absolutely, albeit a silent part, is absolutely a part of 62 Romeo. What we teach in 62 Romeo is here are the behaviors that you take on to get the result that you want. The byproduct is mental health. The byproduct is sleep health, right? We talk about sleep health. We don't really talk about mental health because what we don't want to do is stigmatize. We don't want to label. We don't want to make people feel uncomfortable. We're just going to teach you and train you, which is very different than therapy, right? If you have an active duty service member, they can't go in for mental health without getting scrutiny, right? But they can go in for training and education and make their life better. It's the same result, right? Except for most people actually don't want to go to therapy. I have gone to therapy, I accept that and all that, but it's much easier to take advice from somebody who's been there and done that on training, on hardcore science, that I can do this stuff and I can get the result that I want, which is better sleep health, and a byproduct of that is better mental health.
When we talk about training people, especially within sleep, I remember my time in the service. We our Thursday afternoon training was kind of our mandatory training that we had each week, where you come and you sign a roster, or you go on Navy Knowledge Online. I don't know what it's called now, and you click through the presentation, and we have a lot of really good education from signs of suicide, suicidal ideations, and warning signs to look out for our shipmates and fellow service members, all the way to how to handle our freaking financial checkbook and not live paycheck to paycheck when you're an E1, fresh in the Navy, drowning in debt. Like, we have a lot of really good training, and I know some of the stuff that's being built up around sleep training. A lot of people are going to YouTube, hitting Google and trying to figure out what's best. Unfortunately, when you're a first responder, when you're a military service member, or when you're a parent of a newborn or any child, your sleep schedule is going to be different from that of the average person that's quote unquote required to have 7 hours and fall into REM cycles and set their circadian rhythm. Could you explain a little bit about what these circadian rhythms are, how people in difficult situations like operators or new parents get enough sleep, and how important that REM is in terms of like giving their mind enough rest to begin their journey?
Absolutely. I'm glad that you asked that question because I just got off the phone with the National Sleep Foundation recently. And these big organizations, they mean well, right? But they have no idea what it's like to be a veteran or a first responder, right? And I'm trying to educate them, and sometimes it's like a brick wall, right? Because when you give broad recommendations that are supposed to blanket all of humanity, you miss out on the nuances of individual sex, right? So if we have a veteran or first responder and they have a shift work schedule or they have an irregular schedule, how do you handle that? You can't go back to these silly recommendations like, hey, make sure and get 7 to 9 hours of sleep, make sure and get consistency. It's not that easy, right? So that's where I differentiate because, and by the way, everything that I do, including the 62 Romeo stuff, I put everything out for free, right? To go through the 62 Romeo program costs money because we send equipment and we have staff. But all the general information is out there for free. I try to put it out all the time, but the problem is you have to go through the program and actually do it with the support of our community to establish the habits that you need for long-term results. So anyways, when we look at what do we need to do in terms of circadian rhythms? Well, first of all, circadian rhythms just means your daily rhythm, right? 24 hours, circadia. We want to create some level of consistency within our schedule. Now, this is all general terms, right? We want to be able to build a sleep pattern that is the same every night. Now, what happens if we don't have the same opportunity to sleep every night? Well, then we get into polyphasic sleeping, where we can break things out into multiple phases of sleep. Now, look, what's better? Absolute sleep deprivation, like some of my firefighters are doing right now, or breaking into polyphasic sleeping where we can have a healthier approach to sleep and actually get some recovery with the career choice that we made, right? And the answer is 80% is better than zero. A lot better, right? Because a lot of these folks are intentionally sleep depriving. By the way, 36 months is the average for firefighters retiring right now before they commit suicide or drug overdose. In fact, suicide just exceeded line of duty deaths. We are in the middle of battling this right now, right? And we all know about 22 veterans a day. First response is getting hit hard too, especially since COVID. So in terms of what do we do, right? The recommendations are that we are going to relax and have a wind down period before bed. No matter what time our bedtime is, we want to get into a habit where we have some psychological associations, positive associations with the bedroom. We want to have some, Pavlovian triggers if we can build those in. We want to have some routines, right? And so some of those are setting the stage for bed, meaning avoiding the blue light. We know that keeps us up. It reduces melatonin production. Making it a relaxing setting where you feel comfortable, avoiding fights with the wife or kids, like making the bedroom a sanctity, right? Like we like to call the bedroom the sleep dojo, right? This is a place where we get the majority of our healing in our life every single day. That's where it occurs. So when we approach it, we want to be able to downregulate. We want to be able to relax. So sometimes doing some light yoga, you put on your bedtime clothes, you have low dim lighting, you have a relaxing routine, you put up work, you put up these things that activate you, you turn off the TV, no electronics an hour before bed. You get into these practices. Maybe you want to do some of my box breathing on Insight Timer because it's free and Rob said it's a good idea. Maybe you want to practice some yoga on one of the free, YouTube channels. But you want to get into this relationship with yourself where you're letting go of the future, letting go of the past, letting go of all your problems, and you're spending some time with yourself. You have to do it. You can't just keep ignoring yourself, right? So once you have, remember I said just minimum of 2 minutes, spend some time with yourself, use these relaxation techniques to calm the autonomic nervous system. We want to take most of us have a high anxiety state. We want to take that sympathetic to the environment, sympathetic nervous system state, downregulate into the parasympathetic nervous system state, right? That means that we're going to rest and digest. And in fact, our energy completely changes and shifts energy into the functions of recovery and relaxation. It's a big deal. So if you go into sleep and you're high anxiety, right, then you could have increased levels of noradrenaline. You could be missing out on some of the deep sleep cycles, the slow wave sleep stuff that you need, including hormone production. There's a lot of HGH, human growth hormone, that gets produced during that first piece of deep sleep that can be totally obliterated, right? A lower sensitivity threshold, waking up easier, right? We don't want any of that. What we want is to relax, respect the process of sleep, slip into what's called a hypnagogic state from that parasympathetic, that rest and digest, and we'll have the best chance at getting good sleep. Deep sleep, REM sleep, light sleep, they're 3 different stages, all very important, right? And as we get into those, if we're getting into the whole sleep period from a relaxed state, we're going to have the best opportunity.
I love those practical tips, Rob. Thank you for just sharing, just scratching the surface, because I know in the 62 Romeo programs, you currently have 2 programs out there that go into great detail with your company. And I love that you also offer through your nonprofit scholarships for it looks like half tuition for your classes for these students to receive the equipment and stuff like that. I know, when we focus on doing these basics repetitively, it creates a cumulative effect, and so for our listeners out there, like, I want people to realize that these aren't overnight solutions that are going to change your life instantly. You may not even realize that your life has changed until 6 months down the road because you're not reacting the way that you used to. Whereas a short fix can kind of cut the tension between you and your wife pretty easily, because an anti-anxiety medication brings you down to a lower level instantly, and now you're more tolerable all of a sudden. But these long-term effects, they start addressing the root causes and start adjusting our new normal, which our body wants to get to, and it can only get there through consistent small practices that we do every single day. Would you mind sharing a little bit more about the courses that you currently offer through 62 Romeo?
Yeah, so the 62 Romeo program, it started as a thing with a bunch of combat vets back in 2021. It was just a pilot study. We wanted to see what works. Now we're in our 3rd year of serving veterans and first responders. We just recently allowed civilians to start coming in. We have tons of Navy SEALs that are in all of our classes, of course, right? We have funding for some people. Funding is always limited, but we always do it at cost for veterans and first responders. Unfortunately, civilians pay full price, but we do run sales and stuff like that. So everyone gets together. We have our schedule set out for the entire 2024. Basically, every 2 months, first Thursday, we kick it off. You can go to 62romeo.org to get started, 62romeo.org to get started on your journey. You can enroll in a class, and basically over the course of 2 months, we meet virtually. It's all virtual. It's very easy on your schedule. We send you our famous sleep kit, which has all the sleep stuff inside of it, including sleep measurement technology that our software team will attach to and monitor remotely. You go through the entire program where we learn all these relaxation techniques. We have relaxation staff, and it is really a first-class experience. And then by the time you're done, we wrap it all up. We have a big graduation party. We send you a sleep report, an individualized sleep report. Then we do a class report that we share with everybody. And then we send everybody on their way as sleep ambassadors to go teach their individual circles, their families, their friends. This is how we're going to make a global impact.
Yeah, I love that. And for those that are listening that are interested in it, and you go to the site, don't don't look at the price tag as a cost that you're paying, but it's an opportunity, because when you can pass this on to other people, when you can start saving the lives of those around you, your life starts to get so much more improved. It's an investment in your future. We're looking, if we look at somebody leaving a first responder field and within the first 3 to 5 years dying by suicide, when they should have had another 40 years to go. a cost of a class like this that could have potentially saved their life is well worth the investment. And we know that there are ongoing struggles in suicide rates amongst veterans, military members, service members, not just here in America, but all over the world. Do you have a message of hope for those that are currently struggling, Rob?
Yeah, things are going to get better for you and for the world. It seems destitute sometimes, but things are getting better. We're in the middle of a spiritual awakening across the globe. People are sick of it, and good will always overcome evil. We do have hope, and things are going to get better, especially if you feel like they're really crappy right now.
That's beautifully said. Before we end this call, where can people find and connect with you?
I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on IG, I'm on TikTok, believe it or not. I'm on Facebook. LinkedIn is probably the best place to start. You can email me at rob@62romeo.org. I'm an open book, very easy. Or you can go to www.62romeo.org and you can get all the information that you need right there.
Well, Rob, I truly appreciate you taking the time to join us here on the 1 Mile, 1 Veteran podcast.
Thank you so much, brother.
Absolutely. And for our listeners, you can also catch the 1 Mile, 1 Veteran podcast on Wreaths Across America Radio, ready for you on platforms like iHeartRadio, Odyssey, and the TuneIn app.